Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Step Up to the Mic. This is the place for aspiring and established speakers to take the stage, deliver their talks, and bring them directly to you. Today's featured speaker, he is a business owner, he is a best-selling leadership author, and he is an award-winning speaker. Folks, please welcome to our stage, Dr. Andy Neillie.
Uh, Thanks, Rory. Glad to be on with you and your guests today. Um, and we're going to talk about dogs. In fact, the little book that has become an Amazon.com bestseller is Leadership Lessons from the Life of Our Dogs, the Golden Principles, Life and Leadership Lessons from a Rescued Dog. My wife and I have been rescuing dogs for almost our entire marriage. We're on rescue number 14 and 15 right now. We typically have a couple of dogs. And despite my 5 million frequent flyer miles from flying around the world doing leadership development stuff, despite my dissertation topic on leadership, despite my interview of scores and scores of business and organizational leaders, I think I've learned more about being a good leader from the simple lessons some of these dogs have taught us. Redford is the first one that comes to mind. Redford wasn't our first rescue, but he might have been our neediest rescue. Redford came to us from a puppy mill in Arkansas. 65 dogs were rescued from this puppy mill many years ago and distributed all across the country. Redford ended up in Houston. My wife and I live in Austin, and we're connected with the local golden retriever rescue groups across the state. And we heard of the need to distribute these dogs that had been puppy mill dogs. As we kind of pieced the story together, the best we could understand is Redford was a little bit more than a year old. He probably spent the first year of life in a crate, being let out to eat and urinate and breed more golden retriever puppies that could be sold at a couple $1,000s each. And we drove down to Houston from Austin and made the long trek down to see if Redford would become one of our replacement dogs. We'd lost a dog shortly prior to that. And the first time I looked at Redford, he squatted and urinated. In fact, he wouldn't make eye contact with me for weeks, maybe even months. He was a little bit better with my wife and my daughter, but we decided then and there that Redford needed a home. Here was a challenge for us. The house we were living in at that time, the backyard was off to the side of the garage. And so to get through the doggy door to the backyard, you actually had to go into the garage through that one doggy door and then out the side of the garage to our backyard. And the problem with that is if I came home and hit the button to open the garage door and was pulling in with my car, Redford would be heading out, running away. In fact, Redford, no, became a reoccurring cadence. It was just so frustrating. The best thing that ever happened to Redford is the day we rescued him, and he kept trying to run away. Ultimately, in fact, my wife and I were so frustrated, we hired a local dog psychologist to come and help us try to figure out how do we meet Redford where we are at. And this woman was worth her weight in gold. She just let me know, Andy, your problem is you need to replace your reactive no with a proactive yes. In fact, Andy, when you click that button and start opening the garage door, you got to put your window down. You got to go open the door to your car really fast and celebrate Redford running toward you instead of running past you. Get rid of the reactive no and find a proactive yes. And so for several weeks, probably even into a couple of months, Rory, it just had to look comical to our neighbors because I would roll the Jeep down the driveway, I'd roll the window down, I'd crack the door, I'd hit the button, and I'd be saying, Redford, and I would just be calling his name. And slowly over time, Redford got to the point where he realized, I'm excited to see my master when the door opens rather than I'm trying to get out of this house. And Rory, I just recognize that's a leadership lesson as well, right? All of us who aspire to be leaders and not just managers in our organizations, man, this truism that Redford taught us, a proactive yes is always better than a reactive no. That's not just a rescued dog lesson. That's like leadership 101. Um, that's kind of the first lesson. In fact, that was part of the keynote that I was delivering more than 20 years ago when a publisher was at the meeting in the back of the room, and he said, "Hey, you got any other dog stories like that?" And a year later, the Golden Principles was published with stories like that. Another one that comes to mind is I've traveled a great deal. I've got 5 million frequent flyer miles, as I mentioned. I typically catch the last flight into a client's city the night before an engagement and the last flight out after my speech or my workshop. And regularly for years and years and years, I'd be getting home after dark. I'd be getting home after midnight oftentimes. And I was out there working hard, making a living, keeping my family with a roof over our head and food on the table. And I just decided that, people need to appreciate the work that I'm doing. I'd walk in the house and I would drop my backpack and my suitcase. I'm home. And I would shout out at the top of my lung and expect everybody to come running to thank me for my hard work at midnight or 1 a.m. And when I would walk in the house and yell, "I'm home," Redford would run the other direction. He would just take off. And he had a few places, we called them the caves in our house, underneath the desk and in the den. We had a little kitchen cutout. He would hide under there, or he would curl up against the back door and try to make himself as small as possible. And once again, that just frustrated me. I'm doing all the right things, Redford. You will never not be safe another day in your life. Why aren't you happy to come and see me? And then I just recognized in talking with this dog psychologist, I was doing exactly the wrong behavior if I wanted to lead Redford well. And now, Rory, you and the rest of your audience that know dogs, you've seen dogs when they're in a playful mood at the park or with their playmates. They do what's called a play bow, where they put their tail up in the air and their front paws are stretched out and their tail is wagging. My friend, the dog psychologist, told me, "Andy, you got to do a play bow when you walk in the door. You need to drop your stuff. You need to get down on your hands and knees and get down to Redford's level. Let him know you're safe." And so, grown man, 5 million miles under my belt, I'd walk in the door and drop to the ground and do a play bow. And it didn't happen overnight, Rory, but over time, Redford quit running the other direction and started coming toward me. And once again, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but it didn't take me very long to realize the analogy is really a people leadership analogy. Any leader worth their weight in leadership knows that they got to get down to their people's level. The best leaders are at the bottom of the pyramid, not at the top of the pyramid. You've got to meet your people where they're at if you want to take them where they need to go. If you're going to lead well, you've got to get down to their level. And then the final story that I think fits well for what we're talking about. We lost a dog. Redford needed a companion dog. My wife and I always have at least two dogs. We find they do better, particularly rescued dogs that typically have baggage. Sammy, we rescued Sammy. She came to us. She had been turned in because she had cancer, and the owners didn't want to deal with her having cancer. She was an older dog. We rescued her, and indeed, we had to clear up some cancer. And at first, everything seemed to go fine after the operations, and the doctors were encouraged. And then we noticed a lump on Sammy's front leg, and it was getting larger and larger. We took her into the vet, and indeed, she had a slow-growing bone cancer, and we were able to get it removed, but it came back and it grew, continued to grow. And we just had a heartfelt conversation with our vet, and our vet was this wonderful, wonderful, kind lady. She said, there's a chance we're going to need to turn your dog into what's called a tripod dog. If the cancer comes back one more time, we're going to need to amputate her leg. And my wife and I were devastated. Part of the joy of having multiple dogs, you just saw one jump up on the day bed in our home office. That's Traveler, one of our most recent rescues. My my wife and I were devastated when we learned we might need to amputate Sammy's leg. How would she get along with the other dogs in our backyard? What's she going to do in the park when we're throwing the ball? And our vet, just this kind of wise, animal loving vet, said, Andy, part of what you've got to realize is dogs live in the moment, and she's not going to regret not having a fourth leg. She's just going to adapt to the reality she's dealing with, and she'll be just fine. And indeed, Rory, I've noticed a bunch of tripod dogs in the local park when we take our dogs there, and they look like they're having just as much fun as a dog without an amputated limb. Dogs live in the moment, and they deal with the reality in front of them, and that really screamed into focus for me during the time of COVID. My wife and I own some local businesses here in Central Texas, and we had to shut our doors. We were just told we had to shut our doors, and none of us knew what we were doing. If we all think back on those days and weeks and months, we all were wondering from day to day, what's the next step we need to take? What's the next mandate that's going to come out? What's the next action we're going to have to take? And we didn't really know. And so my leadership team and I, we tried to live in the moment. In fact, we coined a phrase at that time. We called it confident uncertainty. We don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, or the day after that, or the new rules that are coming out next week, or the issues we're going to have to deal with. But here's what we know today. And based on what we know today, we're going to lean into what we can do today. And so we called it confident uncertainty. Put your hand to the plow and lean forward to do as good a job as you can. And if the rules change tomorrow, then we'll figure out the rules tomorrow. Confident uncertainty. Sammy, the dog that was going to lose her leg, would have been just fine. Now, fortunately for us, the second time we did the surgery seemed to take care of it. And we had Sammy for a number of years, and the cancer didn't come back, and we never had to take that step. But you know what? Sammy would have been just fine. She would have just lived in the moment. And once again, I just find the leadership analogy there. Those of us that aspire to be leaders in the 2020s, we lead in a time of volatility, and you can't know what tomorrow is going to bring. And so we need to lead with confident uncertainty, live in the moment we're in, and put our best face forward, put our best foot forward, even if we've only got 3 feet. So, Roy, those are the types of stories that I ended up capturing in the book. Those are the types of stories that I end up sharing in my keynote. This is not rocket science, but I tell you, I think beautiful stories that we can learn from our pets can teach us as much about leadership as a dissertation, as a best-selling book, as 5 million frequent flyer miles of interviewing leaders globally. I think all I need to do is spend some time with Traveler and Lake and Sawyer, our current dogs. So, Rory, that's what I talk about when I have the opportunity to share with audiences. How do we grow as people? How do we grow as leaders? I think there's a lot of lessons we can learn from the rescued pets around us.
And Dr. Andy Neillie, everybody. Doc, I got to tell you, that was incredibly interesting and also entertaining. It was. I like the way you drew all those analogies went together. I gotta ask, the dog rescue thing obviously is a huge part of what you and your wife do, and you talked a little bit about how it got started. But is this something that came from like a previous life of either you or your wife? Were you doing this first, before you met each other, or is this something that you started doing
No, actually, it
together
was
as a
just,
couple?
yeah,
Yeah.
4 years into our marriage, we bought a house, and if you have a house, you got a backyard, you need a dog. And my wife's family was best friend with somebody who was a vet. We were living in Phoenix at the time, and they reached out to the vet, and the vet said, "Hey, I know somebody that just found a dog out in the desert, probably left over from a construction crew that had to move on." And so we rescued Alex, and Alex was a big, beautiful golden retriever who was probably better trained than I am. Somebody who left him in the desert left a really good dog. And he taught us what a wonderful thing a rescue dog can be. But he also taught us that every dog needs a dog. And about 6 months after we rescued Alex, he was tearing our backyard apart because we were both working long hours away from home. And so we got a second dog, and that just kind of snowballed. And Traveler is actually, he's rescue number 14. Another one
Wow.
that just trotted into the room for a minute, Lake, is rescue number 15. Traveler, Rory, we don't know Traveler's story. He was out found running near a freeway here in Austin about a year and a half ago, kind of ragged. And so we named him Traveler. We thought we were just going to have him for a couple of days until we could find him a home. And then my wife and Traveler gave one look to each other, and we became what in the industry is affectionately called a foster failure, which means we're not turning the dog in. We kept Traveler. And it's interesting, Rory, he is our first non-golden or lab rescue. He's primarily cattle dog with German Shepherd, which means he's smarter than the rest of us and he needs a job. And all of a sudden, we're having to work harder with Traveler. We've got to keep him busy or he gets himself in trouble.
That's quite the undertaking. So is 15 the total number of dogs, or are those just the couple that you were
Well,
naming?
over the
Right.
years, we had Alex and and Kai Bab became his partner, and then we lost Alex, and we got another dog for Kai Bab. We typically have two. Right now, we have three dogs, and it's just what are the dogs that God brings to you when you need a dog? And there's a divine appointment that takes place. Our most recent rescue and Travelers cohort in crime is a field golden that just the sad news, it wasn't a horrible rescue. A family in South Texas went through divorce, and the mom got the preteen daughter a puppy to try to make her less sad. And they didn't know how to take care of this puppy, and the dog lived in a crate in the girl's bedroom for a year,
Oh,
and just grew into a 75-pound field golden who needed to be running a couple of miles every day. And so they realized they couldn't handle him, and so once again, the Golden Retriever Rescue Group reached out to us and said, "Hey, can you hold on to this dog for a few weeks until we can find a home?" And my wife and I foster failed on Lake as well. So he's Traveler's partner in crime. Yeah,
nice. Nice. Now, as you're starting to kind of realize some of these things you're learning about the dogs,
yeah.
at what point are you connecting the dots for the book and saying, I'm learning these things for the dogs, but these actually are great for kids or for leadership in a business and for
Yeah,
raising all
yeah,
sorts of different
yeah.
beings.
I think that first story. Oh, there's Lake right there. That first story about Redford and the proactive yes instead of a reactive no.
Right.
Somehow, at some point, I kind of connected the dots when I was talking to this dog psychologist sitting in our backyard, and I realized, man, that sounds like a phrase I ought to use in one of my leadership presentations. And then I began to realize there's a lot of dots that can be connected here. And Rory, I mean, the whole irony of it is that was 15 years ago at this point, and the golden principles is still the keynote that is the one that's most requested. I just shared that story of Redford a month ago for a large privately held construction firm in the Southeast at their biannual leadership meetings. We all love our pets, and it's kind of a chicken soup for the soul reality. There's nothing overly profound, but not being profound doesn't mean it's not wise. I think the lessons from our pets can teach us how to be better people, and ultimately my passion around leadership means you'll never be a better leader than you are a person. So let's get the person thing right, and that'll transform it into your leadership as well.
Nice. Now, some of these points, just the ones that you gave me, I know there's a lot more in the book and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
just the ones you touched on today, especially that get down to the dog's
Oh,
level. And you have to get
yeah.
down to the level of the people that you're managing or coaching, and that sort of thing. In my own experience, I've been around the block a few times, got a few gray hairs here, on the windowsill.
You and I laughed about that a few minutes before we started the interview.
It's right. So, from what I've seen from, management, that seems to be one of the biggest hurdles is, getting them down on the same level as a lot of their employees. Does it help
Yeah.
to enact that change that you're telling stories about dogs, and that type of thing? Does it make it easier for them to maybe swallow?
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, it kind of lets me sneak in with soft gloves so that I can have sometimes the iron fist inside the soft glove, because everybody loves their cats, everybody loves their dogs, all their pets. And Rory, like you, I'm an old guy now, and sometimes it is hard for me to find ways to relate to some of our younger employees. Um, but we all can relate around the dogs. So
Yeah.
it becomes a natural point of connection.
Yeah.
My problem is at times I write about these, I speak about these, they're in the front of my head. Sometimes I don't get them to the back of my mind though. And I expect people to meet me where I'm at because I'm the boss. And that never works. That never works.
Yeah. No, it seems like a really good way to bridge, the
Yeah.
connection. So, I guess as we kind of wrap this up here, the confident uncertainty I thought was very well spoken, very
Yeah.
well said. I'm wondering, especially since we're talking about the younger, group,
Yeah.
when you're a little bit older, you confident uncertainty, I think you can take it pre-COVID because you can look back at your life before that happened, that you had other instances where you may have been able to do it.
Yeah.
But with so many young people, it's almost like their adulthood sort of started there.
Yeah.
And people can't quite get past that, I think. Is it different
Yeah.
talking to the different age groups,
Yeah.
especially where I'm at?
Well, there was a study that Gallup or Forrester put out 18 months ago, Rory, that captured Alpha and the younger generation Y. They would rather quit their job than have a hard conversation with their boss. And part of that, I think, is they don't know how to deal with uncertainty and hard things because their whole life's been thrown in a quagmire for the last however many years now, 5 or 6 years. And so I think, part of the challenge for leaders is, man, we've got to make sure that we are celebrating successes all along the way. The analogy that Stephen Covey the Younger talks about in terms of trust deposits and trust taxes. You got to make the deposits ahead of time because withdrawals are coming. Well, once again, the same is true with these dogs. Lake, the one that's right next to me right now, he lived in a crate his first year. And we have a crate in our house. We crate our dogs at times when we're out and about. Um, we had to leave the door of the crate open for weeks when we first got Lake because he naturally would just go in the crate and just lie there. And it's like, no, Lake, the whole house is yours now. The backyard is yours. We're family. But it took him a while to really believe. He had to see those deposits of, yeah, I'm walking by your crate 10 times and the door's open and I'm leaning in and petting you. He had to see that. Even today, Rory, there was some loud noises outside. My wife and I have been gone for the last couple of weeks on a out of the country trip, and I noticed he went back into the crate, right? Because that's his habit for the first year. Well, the nice thing is it's a safe place for him, but he also just needs to know, man, the whole house is safe for you, Lake. That's you're not going to be yelled at by family members anymore. This is your place. Got to be making those deposits because withdrawals will come.
So many parallels. Wow.
Yeah, so many parallels.
All right. Love that you pointed that out. So how do folks reach you, Doc, and how do they find out about the book, and that type of thing?
Yeah, well, the Golden Principles is available on Amazon.com, and if your listeners are Kindle Prime subscribers, the book's free, so you can download the Kindle version of it. And Neillie Leadership, Neillie, leadership.com is my website. And somebody wants to reach out, there's a link on the top of my homepage for a 15-minute phone call where we can talk about some of these kind of personal life leadership principles, where I really do think it comes back to something you and I nodded our heads on together 5 minutes ago. I'm absolutely convinced you'll never be a better leader than you are a person. And while my calling, if you would, is to work with organizational leaders, I'm really working with people. And animals can teach all of us wonderful lessons if we'll just slow down and listen to them.
Well said. Very well said. All right. Author of The Golden Principles, Life and Leadership Lessons from a Rescued Dog, Dr. Andy Neillie. Thank you so much, sir, for coming on, for putting that talk out there. It was really great, really intriguing, and I hope everybody goes and buys the book. Appreciate your time. Thanks for being here.
You You bet, Rory. Thanks for the platform. You're doing a great job.
Thank you so much. All right, folks, it's been another spectacular episode of Step Up to the Mic. If you're an aspiring or current speaker and you want to bring your talk to the masses, message us today. Never stop talking and let us help you to step up to the mic.